Welcome to Playing to Win. Tonight we have part 2 of the Peter Greco interview.
Because you're a pretty big cricket fan as well, aren't you? Like you love your Test cricket and
Absolutely,
Monday cricket and all that sort of thing. So it was just a thing, and then you had a whole lot of other cricket lovers around you. I mean, it grew pretty quickly. Now, was your debut for the Carnivals? Was that in the 72, 73? Was it or
72, 73 in Brisbane? Yep.
Yeah, so that was your debut. And how did that? Was that pretty scary going up against all the best in the land?
Well, it was hard to know what to expect because I think a few of our players had been to Sydney or 2 years before, so they knew a little bit about it, told us a little bit about it. Now, I reckon between the 2 years, a year before the Brisbane Carnival, I think it seemed for Victoria to come over to sort of show give a bit of competition and that sort of thing. So well, it was pretty scary. I mean, you play against the best in the land, and as I say, because some of the other players had been to Carnival cricket, they tell you about the Ivan Malloys and the Ian Walshers and they had fearsome reputations.
Do you reckon that, and everyone in the other states is saying, "Watch out for Peter Greco," because that would have been the thing. So who do you? I guess it's. I want to talk a little bit more about cricket before we go to your radio. But who do you think the best? Well, let's go for the best partially sighted cricketer and the best totally blind cricketer that you've ever seen
in South Australia or in Australia.
No, all well, you can actually give us your South Australians and then give us your national ones, because I'd really be interested to hear what you think there.
Well,
if you're prepared to say it.
You mean apart from Tim Haggis?
Well, I'm not expecting to be in any of your categories, actually.
Well, I figured you might ask me this, Tim, and I was having a bit of a think about it. One of the best players in South Australia that probably we never, unfortunately, got to see how good he was a lad by the name of Craig Walker.
Oh, you got to, you know what? Absolutely. I do. I know. We would have, it would have been fantastic to see what he could have done. I mean, he was really doing it, wasn't he? He was top level from the start, wasn't he?
I reckon he could have been anything. I remember one day, Bob May, who was an umpire, very quietly spoke and lovely man. So I was bowling and Craig was at mid-on and I bowled it and the batsman whacked it sort of, and Craig ran back sort of towards the boundary, but running backwards towards the boundary and took this amazing catch. And Bob May, who I said was just the quietest person, couldn't believe what a catch he took. But I remember that moment very vividly. But he was a very fine batsman, not a slogger, beautiful timer. But Craig was, unfortunately, for those who might know, he sort of lost his sight, sort of went from a partially to a totally blind player, and
couldn't adjust to the game.
Couldn't adjust,
Well, it was probably, I mean, the thing is, we probably didn't give him enough support that at that time. I mean, that's probably getting a bit too deep into something, but I do think we should have tried a bit hard because he's such a sporty guy. I mean, not only was he a really good cricketer, but he was also represented Australia in running as well. So he was very athletic, and it was sad. I wasn't at the one carnival he went to, but apparently, really, he competed against everyone and did it well. And you're right. So I guess so are you saying that he was potentially the best?
Well, I think potentially could have been a really good player. I mean, those that obviously did. I mean, Peter Hetherington at his peak was as good as any. David Scafidi. Brian McBain was the sort of guy that, the old, if someone had to bat for your life, you'd get Brian to do it.
Absolutely. And he could hit the ball too. He could do it. Like he could go out, you can go out and guarantee, a 20 plus from him, but he could go and get a 30 when you needed him to as well. Great guy too. Like I got to say, one of my favourite people I met through blind cricket was Brian McBain, I reckon, because just such a nice, gentle, kind guy, Yeah,
no, I agree totally. I think Nick Carrozza always, probably
Nick Carrozza.
Didn't get the best out of himself, I don't think. He probably could have been better, but maybe, I don't know, maybe wasn't as disciplined as he could have been. I mean, certainly in
I'm going to send him a message and tell him to listen to this interview and wait for the bit that he, I'm going to say there's something in this interview you need to hear.
Now, when he first started playing, I mean, he was a beautiful, sweet timer of the ball and could bowl really quickly. But, to be fair, I probably stopped playing regularly not long after Nick started. So I probably
well, he
did-
got a lot faster with the ball. I mean, he's probably the quickest bowler in Australia at one time, and he really could. And even I remember him coming out to an intra-club match we had last year or the year before, and bowling at Ricky Segura, who's an Australian player or has been an Australian player, and cleaned him up first ball. So he hadn't bowled in a year. He walked up, steamed in, threw the thing down, middle stump, and Ricky just went, whoa. You know what I mean? Like, he still had it. And I think he retired too early a little because his family and that were, a pretty big part of his life, and he couldn't do the Sundays which is what happens to all of us at one point in time. But you're right, very talented guy. And also another one of my favourites that the person I've met through cricket as well. But you haven't mentioned Eugene Nagruk.
Oh, well, I was coming to that. I was sort of going chronologically towards the end of my career. And Eugene was a fine captain, and he was he was a beautiful timer as well. And of course, was he vice captain of Australia, I reckon?
He might have done one. Yeah, he might have done one tour or one match or something like that. Yeah.
And nationally, well, Peter Donovan was always. Right up there. Just trying to think of the other guys. I mean, Ian Walsh was a very good totally.
Yeah,
of course, he was one. We're talking about Craig earlier. He was one that started as a partially.
Yeah, and he adjusted.
He adjusted. He was a very good player. I mean, Ivan Malloy, my very early days from Victoria, was a good player. Charlie McConnell, a good batsman.
Yeah, I remember. We got a not so good memory of him, haven't we?
Batting a long time. Yeah. Well, if we put the ball on the pitch, it might have helped a bit. But of course,
I remember you getting really grumpy at me when we got him out, and I ran down and go, "Yeah," and you just go, "Leave me alone." I don't need to see you at the moment.
They'd made about 500. I didn't think it was any time to celebrate. I remember that too. Yeah, Les Buchanan, of course, he was a stalwart.
Yeah,
played for a long period of time.
Yeah.
In South Australia, I mean, Michael Zanis, obviously, his record speaks for itself. Michael's probably the best totally, in terms of performances. I mean, when I played, people like Len Clay there, Charlie Johnson, Malcolm Penn were, senior players, I guess. So they probably, if they played 10 years earlier, they might have even had better careers.
Yeah. But Michael went on for a long time, didn't he? He really got in. He came into the game at exactly the right time. Well, he'd been around for a handful of years when the Australian setup started or the international setup started, and he just got in the team and he batted. I mean, he's probably the only B1 player or totally blind player that's ever been just purely selected on their batting, hasn't he? And because I think he bowled a 21 ball over in an international, and he was staying in room 21, right? And then the next tour he was in room 300 and they didn't bowl him. And that I'm going to get him on this show at some point. And he doesn't want to talk about his career until it's over, and he's not saying it's over yet.
I'm sure he'd appreciate that story. I remember actually talking to Bill Frindle, the famous English commentator, the scorer with the BBC.
Yeah.
And he came out here I'm not sure how it was that he was here, but so I interviewed him about the fact that he saw blind cricket, and he said, and I felt so sorry for Michael Zanis that day when he bowled all those wides. And Michael said, God, of all the blind cricket matches he's seen, he had to bring that one up.
Yeah, no, you're gonna love that, don't you? Yeah, but Michael Zanis is known for other things. He scored. He won the Ashes. He was in a partnership with Matt Horsey from Victoria, playing for Australia, and they won the Ashes. That's a pretty significant moment. He was a pretty good fielder as well, but he could always count on him with the bat, and that was a very rare thing for a totally blind player, because you'd have your moments, wouldn't you? But quite often, bouncy ball would often get the better of you, wouldn't it? So
to give Michael his credit, I mean, particularly when I played, I mean, we were playing the single-ended cricket with the nylon ball. I mean, Michael started with that. Michael's first few cards would have been like that, but he obviously adapted really well to the new game, which or to the international game, or whatever you like to call it. I never really had much of a go at that, but so he did very well to adjust to that the way he did.
So you were I think 94, 95 was your last carnival, wasn't it? And we'll call them nationals, but we used to call them carnivals back then because they only happened every 2 years, and it was really quite a bit of cricket, but quite a bit of socialising as well. So there was a carnival atmosphere, I suppose, wasn't it? But so by 95, you were finished at cricket, and this is when the international stuff started to come in. So, but I think you would have been a fantastic international player.
I would like to have had a go at it. I mean, I think like anything, you think will be.
Well, don't rule out a
interesting to
comeback
see how-
now.
Well,
Pete.
that's very
Still
true.
happen.
That's very true. Yeah. But yeah, 92, 93, when the carnival was in Adelaide, New Zealand came over for that, and I was chosen for the for the test match. They had the one-off test, Australia versus New Zealand there, and I reckon that might have been the first. I'm not sure if that was the first test. Actually, I don't quote me on those.
And they had some pretty good players. New Zealand, they were pretty competitive back then, weren't they? They were.
Oh yeah, well of course they played in the carnival as a team, and then during the series there was a one-off test. I don't think they played in Brisbane in 1991, so I think there might have been some test matches before. I mean the rules had sort of changed over the time, so. I can't sort of quite remember that.
And there was many tours where Australian sides went over to New Zealand and tried to do that. So you and I kind of missed out. I mean, I got around it but never made it, and you were just gone a little bit beforehand. So shall we talk about your radio? Well, how did you transition? Because while you were playing cricket, now let's go back a little bit further. I believe you learnt your craft through a guy called Vaughan Harvey. Is that correct?
That was a long time, that was a long time before I actually got, if you like, back into radio. So I did that course back in the 70s, probably just not long after I left Pulteney. And that didn't really amount to much. So then I got involved with a few other things, did a bit of massage course, and then worked a bit in the area of, darkroom technician with Pacific Films and others, and then Benson's radiology with X-ray. So.
Oh, you did X-rays as well.
Oh, yeah. No end to my talent, Tim.
No, I know. I realise. I do realise that because I did. I mean, obviously, you're well educated. You see an opportunity a mile away, and you're into it. So you were just going along. And so, what made you look to radio again?
Well. The short story was that back in 1991, when originally Radio for the Print Handicapped had a 2-hour access program on 5UV, the old Radio Adelaide.
Yeah.
And so the people behind the scenes, the Rosemary Pens of the world, wanted to get a full-time license for the radio station, which was happening in other states. Yeah. So when this opportunity came up, RPH, as it was then, got the nod to have its full-time radio station. There were ideas being thrown around about, to fill up the program, and we went from 2 hours a day reading the advertiser to, sort of 24 hours what we're going to fill it with. Yeah. And one of my ideas was, well, what if I do a report on blind cricket through the summer, and sort of one thing led to another, and a few programs sort of came out of that.
Because now I don't know if we have saved the best for last. Because I mean, I pretty much think your cricket career is on par with your radio career. Because you got into it, and you had a little bit of a radio background. You've got a great voice for radio as well, by the way. Like naturally, I mean, I knew you before you did radio, and you've always been a pretty happy, kind of friendly, easy to talk to kind of guy. So it would seem like a natural thing for you to do. So. So you were doing a blind cricket show, and then how did it kind of evolve from there?
Well, the blind cricket report was part of the show, which was, it still is called Leisure Link, and a couple of people involved that sort of said, you want to do a bit more, and sort of started getting an interview or two from other areas. So wheelchair sport was pretty big in those days. The Special Olympics. That sort of stuff. So it just sort of grew from there, almost. I don't know, sort of organically. It just sort of happened almost without trying.
So, what year did you start? When were you?
That was the weekend after the 1991 SANFL Grand Final. So the
Really?
first Sledge Link went to air
The
October
Northwest
1991.
Bloodbath Grand Final we're talking
That's the
about.
one, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the weekend after that, so
The
obviously...
weekend after that was when the show went to air, yeah.
Wow, so you've been nearly close to 30 years on radio, Pete.
Yeah, 29 years actually, last month, yeah.
And now
as we record.
Last night, did you say?
As 29 years ago last month as we record.
Oh, last month, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's grown from a cricket report into a disability sport report, but you have interviewed people far and wide. And I know in the last few months I have broadened my circles in the vision impaired community. And the buzz about Peter Greco on Peter Greco's show is amazing. Like people saying, "Oh, I've got an interview with Peter Greco." I'm going, "Oh, mate, I've done thousands of those." No, but so now you've got Leisure Link, which is mostly about disability sport and recreation, and then you've got another show on Wednesdays as well.
Yeah, there's two, but sort of all very similar. So they're about blindness and vision impairment, or specifically about blindness and vision impairment. So Vision Extra and Focal Point are those two shows.
And do you feel like you've got? I mean, are you planning to continue on for a long time to come?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you ask that, because I don't think about what I will do after this, because I do really genuinely enjoy it. And of course, in the last few months with COVID, we've had to do a little bit differently. So I'm now not that I should be telling you this. I actually record the shows before they go.
Oh, I know that already, Pete. Don't worry. I'm fully aware of it.
But for all the other listeners, I want to keep.
Well, where do you think I got the idea for this podcast?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's opened up the opportunity to speak to people internationally as well. So
yeah.
So I guess different things happen, and all of a sudden. Opportunities open up in different areas. So I'd certainly like to do it for a little bit longer, for sure, or maybe a lot longer, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you first started, did the RPH offices were in the Guide Dogs building, weren't they?
That's right. Yep.
So you started off in there. So you're going from Waterloo Corner in there every Saturday and doing your hours radio and then coming back. And were your guests coming into the station, or were you doing it over the phone, or how were those interviews?
Mainly over the phone, but occasionally guests used to come in. But yeah, generally they were over the phone. And that's the other thing, or another thing with the way we're doing it now. The quality of the line is so much better when we're doing it via the internet. That compared
Zoom
to
is a pretty good avenue. So now you don't have to go in. So what do? You record your interviews and send them all in, and or record your show and send the whole thing in.
Well, actually, a guy that many people may know, Sam Rickard, who has represented Australia, is very much involved with the technical side of things now. So
is he really?
Yeah.
Sam. Yeah, well, he's a very talented IT guy, as far as I know. I mean, he was. I haven't had much to do with Sam for many years, but he, as well as being a very good runner in his day, wasn't he?
Well, he tells me he was a good runner. Yeah.
Apparently, he came fourth a couple of times. I mean,
went to a couple of Paralympics.
He did.
Yeah. No,
and he came fourth twice, I think he's said to me. I think he did. But he was in an era of some very good runners as well. So it's a bit like Stuart McGill, being around when Shane Warne was playing. And then by the time Warney retired, Stuart McGill didn't have enough in it, but he still took 200 and something wickets as a guy that only made the team half the time, didn't he?
Well, it's true. And I think actually his strike rate is better than Warney's. But, Sam's represented Australia at Paralympic Games, so you can't take that away from him.
Exactly, and it's no easy feat, is it?
No, they don't hand those out for fun.
No. So anyway, so Sam's so he takes your interviews and sort of does them up for you, does he?
Yeah,
or gets them ready?
Sort of, edits out all the bad bits. So sometimes the surprised there's anything left for him to put to air, but... He does a good job.
So what about all the announcing stuff in between times? Like, I mean, you do your interviews, but you also do a lot of other sort of talking as well. So just record the whole show, and then just piece it together. Is that how?
Oh, well, I can't tell you all my secrets.
No, it's true.
No,
yes, you're right.
No.
But it's very clever because no one would know except my listeners, which are 4 people. So
okay. Well, Can I ask them, please keep it a secret? Let
Yeah,
people think
okay,
that I'm there live on a Wednesday night and a Saturday afternoon.
Well, they've been keeping my show a secret for quite a while, so don't worry. I'm pretty sure you're safe here. So I think we. So I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions about your radio career. I'm just having to watch the time because we have gone a little bit over. But how's that a surprise? Because there's so much to talk about. Interview highlights. You would have interviewed some amazing people, I'm sure.
Actually, someone asked me this the other day, and I said I'm not going to name my favourite person I've interviewed because it's a bit like not that I've got children, because it's a bit like saying who's your favourite child. But and this is the answer I gave the other day. So sorry I can't come up with something original, Tim. But one of the real buzzes that I do get, and I still get now, and I don't take what I do for granted, because it is a privilege and an honour to do it. But when you speak to people who say might have an intellectual disability or might be involved with an activity that they wouldn't otherwise get a chance to speak on the radio, and they do, and their parents or their teachers or people they know say to you, oh, look, he or she was just so excited about the fact that they were going to be on the radio, and they were telling their folks about it for weeks before and weeks afterwards. I mean, that's almost as gratifying as anything I do.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think I've listened to a lot of your work, Pete, and you are good at, and I think a lot of people love your questioning style as well. I don't know if you've had feedback on this, but you'd love to probe into something and get all the information out, and you've got a way of asking questions that extracts the right information out. Would you agree, or do you think, has anyone ever told you that?
Oh, you're making me blush, Tim.
But you've got a good style about you. But okay, the last question I've got for you. So the most high profile person you've ever interviewed?
Oh, gee, that's a tough one. I guess it depends on how you define profile.
Well, I mean, somebody that everyone would know. But,
someone that everyone would know. Well, I've interviewed Ian Healy, of course, the Australian wicketkeeper. Well, actually, the other day I interviewed Russell Ebert.
Oh, did you?
He was the community leader, or the South Australian community leader, during the SA Awards.
Oh, right. Well, Russell Ebert is a very, he'd be a worthy recipient of that. Because they used to joke about how he knew everyone, didn't they? Like the joke was Russell knew.
Yeah. I mean, Barry Robin, who was a judge with the Stan Wickham Awards, interviewed, and people like Louis Savage, who, Kurt Friendly, these Paralympians who everyone knows, of course, the late Kieran Modra, who many people would know, many listeners would know Kieran.
Absolutely. And those, and I guess you now realise how important those kind of interviews. And I don't think being interviewed was probably Kieran Modra's favourite thing to do either. He wouldn't have been telling his family and friends for weeks that he was going to be on the radio.
No, that's probably true, Tim. Yeah, that's a good pickup. But by the same token, he never said no. If he could do an interview, he'd make himself available. But a nice recognition the other day, being inducted into the Sport SA Hall of Fame.
Huge thing. And actually, just to touch on Kieran Modra a little bit, because I didn't know him well, so we'd go to things and I'd have a conversation with him. And there are two things that I'll tell you about with him now. Was the last conversation that I had with Kieran Modra was at the iPlay Sport AGM. And I was planning to do a triathlon with, I was going to get Ricky Segura and Mark Haskett, and we're going to do a bigger triathlon, so like a bigger one. And I was going to do the bike riding part. And he said, have you done any training? And I said, well, I've ridden an exercise bike in the gym and I can ride the distance. And he said, nah, have you been on a bike? And I said, no, not really. I can't get a front rider and all this sort of thing. He said, you're not ready. Don't do it. You're just gonna regret it later, because you should really learn the bike and learn how to do the ride properly first. And the second thing, part of that conversation, was my son Shay was there, and he said, oh, how's Shay's eyesight? And I said, oh, he's got good eyes. It all worked out really well. And I said, but sometimes, when people in our community ask that, I don't go around promoting it. And because Kieran's got 3 daughters, and I think at least one of them's got a vision impairment. He said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He said, you know what? It's all cool. Like we're all, all kind of one big family. And And then we're out the front and we're all getting ready to go, and it was getting a bit dark, and he's jumping on his bike. I said, mate, be careful out there, like it's just crazy peak hour time and it's getting dark. He said, yeah, no worries. And that was the last time I saw him. And then after his passing, I learned so much about all the things he'd done, like all the work he'd put into cycling and things like that. So I'm sure you treasure every single chat you had with him, Pete.
Well, it's it is the sort of thing that sometimes, as you say, when it's happening, you don't sort of think about the consequences of it if it is the last time you might speak to him. I guess that goes with any relationship that you might have with people, but he certainly left an indelible mark.
Yeah, well, you've been fortunate enough to be in those positions, because also with Rosemary Penn, who was another person we both knew really well, who died in 2018, and you were lucky enough to interview her just a few weeks beforehand as well, weren't you? Yeah,
look, and again, on reflection, that was just, I was privileged to be able to chat to her on the night, and interesting, sometimes it is a bit of a blessing being blind, because apparently she looked very unwell. Yeah. And but she sounded fantastic. So
mate, it's been fantastic talking to you. I knew it would be an amazing conversation, and I'm really new at this, and you've been doing it for many years. So hopefully I asked all the right questions and got, did a reasonable job on you.
Oh, well, I'll leave others to be the judge of that, Tim.
No worries. No,
good on you, Tim. I appreciate you speaking to us. And yes, we've known each other a long time, so always good to catch up.